Hey all, Tony Bing here. Hello and welcome to another guide video for Marvel Heroes Omega for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Now with this guide video we will actually be looking at all 30 different Omega sets that are in the game. Now I'll bring up the tooltip, I'll quickly run over what it offers. I won't go too in depth on that, show sets and who they could work for the reason being that I'm going to do separate videos for that, and it would make this video exceptionally long if I was able to do that. So this is more a showcase as well. So the first set that we'll look at here will be the Phoenix Force. So this set here is really all based around buffing your signature. So for one piece, when you use your signature power, range attacks will deal damage. Now the amount of damage it actually deals is based on the amount of damage you have yourself, so I'm not going to cover the numbers because they'll change from hero to hero and from player to player. Now this works up to 3 times per signature activation. You gain 50% base damage to signature powers. The Phoenix effect can trigger 3 additional times per signature activation. Another 50% base power to signature powers, that would be 4,000 in total, which is huge, and also 100% critical hit chance to signature powers, which is pretty amazing there. But let's look at the next one. The next set we have is the Oath of Destroyer. So each critical strike with melee powers builds stacks of rage. When 50 rage stacks are reached, they're consumed to trigger Destroyer's Wrath. Now with that, it increases your brutal strike chance by 100% for 5 seconds, which is really pretty nice. On top of that, for 2 and 4 items, you gain a total of 100 brutal damage. You also gain rage stacks required to trigger Destroyer's Wrath is reduced to 40, or for the full 5 pieces it's reduced down to 30 in order to get that Destroyer's Wrath buff. But let's check out the next one now. The next one we have then is the Mark of the Iron Fist. So when you use your signature power, for the next 10 seconds, striking enemies with hand-to-hand powers regenerates 25% of your maximum spirit. You also gain through 2 and 4 pieces a total of 30% base damage to hand powers, and you have, when you hit an elite or boss enemy with a hand-to-hand power, you gain Master Technique. Now this increases your base attack speed of hand-to-hand powers by 1% for 10 seconds, stacks up to 15 times, and on top of that, if you look at 5 pieces, Master Technique effect also increases hand-to-hand critical hit chance by 1% per stack. So in total there, you could be getting the 30% base damage to hand powers, 15% attack speed to hand powers, and 15% critical hit chance to hand powers. So really pretty nice, and not surprisingly, it would be great on Iron Fist. The next Omega set is the Ancient Shroud of Khonshu. So Khonshu relates to Moon Knight, but I do believe Gambit has staff attacks as well, so it could work for him. So when you use a staff power against an elite or higher enemy, gain Blessing of Khonshu, increasing damage against elites and bosses by 40% for 10 seconds with a 30-second cooldown. In total you'll gain 20% base damage to staff powers through 2 and 4 pieces. You also increase damage reduction by 20% for 10 seconds. That's on a 30-second cooldown. That's really quite potent, that. And for the full set, bonus damage increased to 80% for 10 seconds. Again, you've got the 30-second cooldown on that there. But let's check out the next one. This next set is called Illyana's Legacy. So this could work really great on teleport heroes such as Magik and also Nightcrawler. You gain 1 charge to teleport powers, helping you stay mobile. You gain 50% bonus damage to teleport powers. When you use a teleport power, you open a rift to Limbo, dealing damage to nearby enemies for 3 seconds. And then finally for the full set, after using a teleport power, dodge the next attack you receive within 2 seconds. That seems quite powerful if there's not actually an internal cooldown on it on someone like Nightcrawler, who'll constantly be teleporting all over the screen and getting the guaranteed dodge after doing it. So that really is quite interesting there. But let's check out the next one. This set here then looks like it's custom made for Hulk. It's Quake's dynamic gear. Now 3 seconds after using the force power, send an aftershock through the area, dealing damage and causing the enemy to take an additional 10% damage for 5 seconds with a 10-second cooldown. You gain a total of 50% base damage to force powers. For 3 pieces of this, you pulse a second aftershock after another 3-second delay, so that's tagged on to the initial aftershock you get for 1 piece. And then finally for the full set, aftershock effect cooldown and delay before activating is reduced by 50%, so you could really have that triggering quite often there, and I'm quite intrigued to see how this particular set will look. But let's check out the next one. So we now have Quicksilver Treads. I'm really not sure about this one at all, to be honest. Potentially on some heroes using One Piece, it could be useful if you want a bit more mobility. So for One Piece, when you use your med kit, you restore 2 charges to your dash powers. You also gain 30% dodge rating multiplier, 15% critical hit chance to dash powers plus an additional dash charge, and further 30% dodge rating multiplier, so that's 16 total. And for the full set you've got 250% damage to dash powers and an additional dash as well there. So could maybe even work on Juggernaut potentially, that is an option there. But let's check out the next one. The next set we have then would be perfect for Gambit. It's Remy's Raiment. So when you use a throw power, it delivers a guaranteed brutal strike. The effect can only occur once every 5 seconds. So you potentially also want to look out for heroes that have maybe 1 or 2 throw power tags, and then as long as you're using them less than every 5 seconds, you know you're then guaranteed a brutal strike. So that could be an interesting option. Now you also gain in total 30% base damage to throw powers. Your throw powers occasionally are charged with kinetic potential, dealing an additional damage in an area, so that's like almost a second raging cage, and you can get if you're using it on Gambit. And then finally you gain 100% bonus damage to kinetic energy. So let's check out the next set now. The next set we have is Rocket's Reinforcements. So when you hit an elite or boss enemy, you summon 2 turrets who fire at the enemy for 10 seconds with a 20-second cooldown. For 2 pieces, turrets fire Gauss blasts every few seconds, dealing a really quite nice amount of damage. For 3, turrets provide cover and fire, increasing your range base damage by 20% while they're alive, so that's 50% uptime you have on that. For 4 you summon an additional turret, and for 5 it doubles the damage bonus effect of cover and fire, so that'll give you a total of 40% base damage to range powers. So although it is summons, the damage is actually scaling off your own damage, so this can work on a lot of heroes. And this is a set that if potentially I'm maybe using 3 or even 2 on a particular hero and I don't know what to choose next, I would happily place this one in as well. But let's check out the next set. This next set's a really interesting one and could be really pretty powerful on movement heroes. It's Shards of Cyttorak. So with this you gain 25% base damage to movement powers, plus 1 charge to movement powers. On top of that, when you use a movement power, increase the base damage of movement powers by 20% for 5 seconds, and that stacks up to 10 times, so a total of a bonus of 200% base damage to movement powers. For 4 pieces it stacks 20 times, so that's 400% base damage, and for 5 pieces it stacks 30 times for 600% base damage, which is incredible. The one thing with 5 stacks, or 5 set pieces even, is when you reach the full amount of 30 stacks, the stacks are consumed to reduce movement power cooldowns by 70% for 5 seconds, which could be useful, but personally I'd probably go 4 deep into this particular set so that we're keeping the 20 stacks up all the time. Really pretty nice there. But let's check out the next one. This set here then could work on quite a few heroes, because quite a few of them have the stealth as part of their dash in their kit. So it's Stark Tech Stealth Weave. When you use a stealth power, the next time you deal damage to an elite or higher enemy, that attack will trigger a weak point strike dealing damage. It's a nice amount it does. That's for 10-second cooldown. You also gain 40% base damage versus bosses. When you use a stealth power, regenerate 5% of your max health per second and gain 20% movement speed for 6 seconds. And also for the full 5 pieces, you gain an additional 100% damage to that weak point strike, so it really could hit pretty hard there. Nice interesting set. I reckon I'll probably be putting that on Black Widow. But let's check out the next set. So this set here is based around finishers and openers, so that could work on Luke Cage, Daredevil, or also She-Hulk. It's Styx Teachings. Now, after using a finisher power, increase base damage of opener powers by 25% for the next 5 seconds. You also gain 30% base damage to opener powers. When you defeat an opponent with a finisher power, increase the damage of your next finisher power by 50%, so I could make the kick on Daredevil even more powerful than it is already. You also gain 30% base damage to finisher powers, and then for the full 5 sets you gain 20% critical hit chance to both opener and finisher powers. So imagine that could really make Daredevil pretty beastly this set. Let's check out the next one now. This next set here, then, given the name you can see it's clearly for Cyclops, but it could actually work fantastic on a minigun build. with Punisher as well. So you gain 3% base damage to channeled powers for each power currently on cooldown, and you also get 20% base damage to channeled powers. You reduce the spirit cost of channeled powers by 25%, which will help out the focus beam build on Cyclops a ton. You also gain another 20% base damage to channeled powers, and then finally your channeled powers cause enemies to take 20% more damage, scaling up the longer the channeled power is used on the target. Unfortunately it doesn't say how many times that would scale. It'd be interesting. Here's hoping it's up to something silly like 10, so you can do an insane amount of damage. That would be really great. But let's check out the next set now. This next set is Thunder God's Gift, so it could work great on Thor, not surprisingly. It could also work on Storm as well. So when you use an electric power, call forth a Thunderbolt to strike your foes for damage, and it's got a 10-second cooldown. You also gain a total of 40% base damage to electric powers. When you brutal strike with an electric power, you reduce the cooldown of the Thunderbolt and all electric powers by 1 second. That's potentially very interesting, that depending on what the internal cooldown on it would be. And for the full set, every time you fully deplete your spirit, your electric powers gain an additional 10% base damage for 15%, and that stacks up to 4 times. So that would work fantastic on 4, maybe not as good on Storm because you don't want to deplete her resource, so on Storm you'd probably use 4 out of 5, and 4 you'd potentially go for the 5 out of 5. But let's check out the next set here. This next set then is called White Queen's Crown, so it looks like it's going to be Emma's set, but it would work fantastic on a Psychic Gene build as well. Now, when you use a Psychic power against an elite enemy, force them to bend the knee while other nearby enemies panic in fear for 6 seconds. Pretty awesome that. You also gain 20% base damage to Psychic powers. When you use your signature power, refresh the cooldown of your Psychic powers and take 50% less damage for 6 seconds. That's actually really pretty incredible if you're on a hero that's got a signature that actually has a psychic tag and it's got a low cooldown as well. I really like that a lot. For the full set, when you use your signature power, you refresh the cooldown of all powers, and your psychic powers have an increase of 30% critical hit chance for 6 seconds. So absolutely love this set. Got the potential to be really powerful with this. Now let's check out the next one. This next set then may be based around a wind build on Storm. It's Wrath of the Wind Rider. When you use a dash power, you conjure a tornado to attack enemies, dealing damage twice per second for 8 seconds with a 20-second cooldown. You also gain 50% base damage to wind powers. When you hit with a wind power, blast enemies with hurricane winds, dealing damage, and that's got a 15-second cooldown. And then finally, using a wind power increases the damage of the next hurricane wind effect by 10%, but that actually stacks up to a whopping 20 times for a huge 200% damage bonus on that attack, and it already hits for a pretty nice amount as it is there. Now let's check out the next set. This next set then obviously is geared towards Wolverine, but it could also work on a Claw Black Cat build. It's Mark of Wolverine. Now when you use your signature power, you gain 15% base damage for 10 seconds. Claw powers gain an additional 15% base damage. For 2 pieces, you gain 15% base damage to claw powers, and you gain an additional 15 for 4 pieces, that's 30 in total. When you hit an elite enemy with a claw power, you gain Frenzy, increasing base damage speed of claw powers by 1% for 10 seconds, stacks up to 10 times for a 10-second bonus on it. And then finally for the full set, the Frenzy effect can stack up to 20 times, and the stacks now refresh during their duration. So interesting set there for Wolverine, and could really get him attacking fast and furious the way he should be. So if you're watching this video today then, which is the 5th of October, this set here relates to Hero. It's released on console today as well. It's the Blessing of Blackagar Boltagon. Now you gain 100% critical hit chance to energy powers, which sounds amazing, but if you read the rest of the tooltip, critical hits with energy powers disable the effect for 4 seconds. This could be great on hybrid heroes that don't use energy powers as often. It can give them a guaranteed critical hit. You also have 15% base damage to energy powers. When you use an energy power, increase the base damage of energy powers by 25% base damage and restore 100 health per second for 4 seconds on an 8-second cooldown. You've got another 15% base damage, bringing that up to 30% in total for energy powers. And then for the full set, you have a chance when you're attacked for your next energy power to be a brutal strike. That's got an 8-second cooldown there. This next set then is for my boy Hawkeye. So Clint's custom quiver. Some of the effects on it aren't great, but one of them in particular is incredible and potentially the strongest mecha effect there is. So when you use an arrow power, you fire an additional volley of 9 arrows, dealing damage, 10-second cooldown. That's pretty weak. You have 50% base damage to arrow powers, which is nice, but for 3 pieces you gain a whopping 50% brittle strike chance to arrow powers, which is incredible on Hawkeye because he already has a pretty high critical hit chance. This really is fantastic. For 5 pieces, arrow powers have a 10% chance to reset all arrow power cooldowns. Only occurs every 60 seconds. I don't rate this at all because Hawkeye already has pretty low cooldowns as it is, so resetting them isn't massively useful. So I would use 3 pieces on this particular set here, but let's check out the next set. So this next set for Scarlet Witch is an absolute ton to read out. It's the Crimson Cloak of Chaos. So you gain a 1% chance in hit to turn non-boss enemies into a box. Boss enemies will take damage instead. You also gain 15% base damage to magic powers, 3% chance to restore 61% health when you use a magic power, another 15% base damage to magic powers, 3% chance to restore 45 spirit when you use a magic power, 15% base damage to magic powers, 3% chance to reduce your signature cooldown by 3 seconds when you use a magic power, and then finally your magic powers occasionally conjure between 3 and 9 chaotic hexes, dealing an additional amount of damage with an 8-second cooldown. So really interesting, and I'm not going to give too much away, but I would say check out our talents for something that could make full use of this particular set. That's all I'm going to say for now. So this set here can work fantastic on summon heroes if you use the full set, but if you actually go only 3 pieces into the set, it can work great on non-summon characters as well, so do bear that in mind if you've got some extra slots available. This is the Banner of Doom. When you attack a boss enemy, you trigger a Latvarian airstrike. It does a whopping amount of damage, 60-second cooldown. What's great about this is the more pieces you have, when you call that in, you summon a random Doombot mech. You can also summon 3 Doom drones. For 4 pieces, when you use a summon power, you increase the damage of the Doombot and Doom drones, and that stacks up to 10 times for 100%. And then for the full 5 pieces, you gain an additional 40% base damage to summon powers there. So I like this set a lot, and as mentioned, do bear in mind if you've got some extra spaces and other heroes, you might want to go potentially 2 or 3 pieces into this particular set. This next set is called Dormammu's Embrace. This would work great on Ghost Rider or Jean. It's 20% damage against targets with burning status with fire powers, and you also gain 50% base damage to fire powers. When you use a fire power, you call upon a living flame of the Faltine to attack enemies. It deals a really nice amount of damage there. It's got roughly about a 40% uptime on it. For the full set, you'll summon an additional living flame of the Faltine as well. So the actual animation it uses is the same one that, let's see, it would be Johnny Storm on the PC would use for anyone that is curious there. But let's check out the next set. So you now have your potential Iceman set. This is the Frozen Stone. So after using your signature, your next ice power triggers permafrost, dealing damage and freezing all targets for 1.5 seconds. You also gain 50% base damage to ice powers. When you hit with an ice power, you conjure volatile cold, which flings icicles at enemies, set amount of damage, 20-second cooldown. And then finally for the full set, using an ice power increases the damage of the next volatile cold effect by 10%. That stacks up to 20 times for a huge 200% bonus damage on that particular skill there. The next set's a very interesting one that I need to spend a bit more time in the training room on to see how potent it actually is, but it's got the potential to be great. It's Gamora's Garments. So every non-critical hit causes you to gain focus, increasing your chance to critically hit by 1%. The bonus resets when you critically hit. So this is for characters that have got low critical hit but potentially high base damage. You also gain 100% critical hit damage, and when you focus increases your chance to critical hit by an additional 0.5 per stack. That's for 3 pieces, so that takes up to 1.5%. And finally for the full set, it goes up again by another 0.5%, so that would mean every time you actually hit and it's a non-crit hit, your crit hit would go up by 2% per time there. So as mentioned, potentially interesting set. I'll do a bit of actual playing about in the training room and I will report back how I got on with that. Final set we look at here is the Guise of the Green Goblin. So with this, once per 10 seconds an explosive power will be armed with cluster grenades and they detonate, dealing additional damage. You also gain 30% base damage to explosive powers. You gain 25% movement speed. While in combat, the damage of your explosive abilities is increased by 20%. And then finally, when you use your dash powers, you drop a pumpkin bomb behind you, leaving damage as well there. So hopefully, with that being in the game, it means it won't be too far along the road until we get Green Goblin, because I'm really looking forward to him. Now that is 25 sets covered, and as you probably know, it's 30 sets in total. The remaining 5 sets are the 4 Horsewomen and also Apocalypse that I've already covered in another video. So if you want to check them out, have a look at the description, there's a link to that there. And finally, well, we'll mention it, we've had a Punisher War Journal set that's been teased. Looks fantastic on explosive heroes, potentially on Punisher of course, but also Deadpool. I'm not including this just yet because it's not actually in the game, it's just been teased. I think it was potentially on an internal build and it could change, so I don't want to show that off here. But as always, I hope this video was useful. If you get any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll see you all again soon.